Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. This is Robert Phoenix. How is everybody today? Sorry for the delay. Had a bit of a technical glitch here on this side. But here we are, and drinking coffee through the early morning South Central haze, where the geoengineering and the spraying is taking just a full and fine effect upon our once blue skies that we were delighted and fetid with yesterday. So nice to have a virginal blue sky. I wonder what would happen if we had blue skies without any spraying for about a week, maybe two? Would the world end? Would it be just a total catastrophe if we just didn't have any spraying for a couple of weeks? I mean, come on now. And if that's the case, then we may as well just find out, because it might be better than the solution that they're offering up to us currently. So what's happening out there? The latest buzz on the street is that Jared Kushner is now getting outed, finally. And it's taking the alt-right to bring the lumber on Kushner. Finally, Alex Jones, the embattled host of InfoWars, who just lost custody of his kids. I mean, he still has his kids, don't get me wrong. He's a lot more like me now, in that he does not have full-time possession of his children. The primary residence now resides with his wife, ex-wife rather, Kelly. Is that her name, Kelly? And he gets the same kinds of visitation rights that I do with my son, thanks to the state of Texas. Isn't it lovely how the state has intervened constantly and consistently in how we are able to spend time with our children? It's one of the pieces in my life that I have had to do a lot of surrendering on. So Jared Kushner now has been the talk on the alt-right side. They're never going to talk about this in the mainstream media, because the mainstream media, of course, we know is controlled, and is controlled by a couple of different entities. The CIA has its fingerprints over everything inside the mainstream media, and has for years. The CIA has people located all over the country at news desks, sitting behind microphones, in front of cameras, on news sets. They're embedded. They're everywhere. So unless a story is greenlit by the CIA, it generally does not go through. Now, there are other forces that control our media as well. And we know that there are a very small number of media properties that are consistently owned by about 5 or 6 entities all across the country. Now, that wasn't the case before. We had antitrust laws, we had monopolization laws, and those went away during the Reagan era. And on the heels of that, we had these media giants buying up everything, so that now there's very little competition, and the messaging across the platforms is almost always the same, or at least consistent in the case where they need to build a case, such as Iraq and 9/11. And then we have the power and influence of certain groups. People that are connected to Goldman Sachs, people that are connected to Shabbat Lubavitch, people that are connected to media in general. Go back to Joel Stein's article that he wrote for the Hollywood Reporter about 7 or 8 years ago. It is still as timely as it ever was. And he basically celebrates the fact that that Jewish media is in control of just about everything from top to bottom. And you can look at a case from who runs the networks and who runs the studios, and it is not a claim of either racism, bigotry, or anti-Semitism to make the connection that the studios are run by a small group of people that are connected by their faith, by their community, sometimes by family and blood. So now that we've distilled who runs the media and who has the influence over the media, it's easy to see why somebody like Jared Kushner is not outed. It's because unless it's in the interests of the multinational corporations who the CIA fronts for, unless it's in the interest of one of the 4 or 5 or 6 entities that runs just about every media platform, unless it's in the interests of the people that are running the studios and their interests, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And only until they decide that they want to promote a story and push a story does it get pushed. And this is what happened. And this is one of the more revolutionary pieces that took place during this last election, because the internet had reached this kind of critical mass, this crescendo of, for lack of a better term, the obstinance. It would be the obstinance of information, or the obstinance of propaganda, because people wanted to find out what was really going on, and they wanted to get down into the truth with a little, double shot of WikiLeaks and the material that came out during those WikiLeaks dumps. It got people ignited. It was like an accelerant. And whether it was Pizzagate or whether it was the sacrifice of politically correct thinking at the altar of mainstream media, it was a very powerful moment in time, and still continues to be a very powerful moment in time. And so this is where we are today, and we're talking about Kushner. Alex Jones has come out and said, I didn't vote for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Now, this is kind of a significant break for Alex Jones. And he's not the only one that's been saying this. Milo Yiannopoulos is back with a website, and he, of course, was involved in sort of breaking the story. But we've known for a while now that Jared Kushner and his brother took a significant amount of money from George Soros. But there's other findings that are connected to Jared Kushner that we're going to get into today, just briefly, and I'm going to pop around and do a few more other things here. So this is from Sputnik News. It says U.S. President Donald Trump's senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, did not disclose existing business connections with the investment firm Goldman Sachs Group and billionaires George Soros and Peter Thiel. How about that? Peter Thiel's in on this now. Kushner holds shares of a New York-based real estate financial firm, Cadre. That's C-A-D-R-E, if you're keeping score at home. That works on a number of projects with Goldman Sachs and prominent investors, including Soros. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing security filings, Trump's son-in-law also failed to report nearly $1 billion in loans from more than 20 lenders to his corporations and properties. According to the filings, Kushner's lawyer, Jamie Gorelick, said his client disclosed his ownership of BFPS Ventures, LLC, which is a housing company for Cadre. Since Trump took office in January, U.S. media and lawmakers have detailed a number of his and his family's business dealings and possible conflicts of interest. In April, Senator Michael Bennet suggested foreign individuals, entities, and governments may patronize Trump businesses to influence the White House policies. Kushner is a former real estate developer. He's not former. He is still a real estate developer. He tag teams with his brother. His brother is running the deals, and Kushner is the silent partner who began advising Trump and meeting foreign leaders after the November election. He was named to an official White House position on January 9th, the same day he announced he would step down as CEO of the Kushner companies. So here we go. The information has been there, and it's coming out, but to what extent? Will Donald Trump wind up firing Jared Kushner? I don't think so. But, it's got to be weird. I mean, let's say you're Donald Trump Jr., or let's say you're Eric Trump, but mostly Donald Trump Jr. because he's the firstborn male, right? Wouldn't you be a little bummed out that this guy is a stand-in for you? That he's just kind of taken up space and blocked out the sun, and he's at your father's beck and call on the right elbow of Donald Trump everywhere he goes? Don't you think that that should be maybe your role? But I guess somebody's got to run the Trump empire now that Princess Ivanka has stepped away and it falls to Don Trump Jr.'s shoulders. But I don't think anything is going to come of this. I think Jared Kushner will retain his power, will retain his position, because he has too much clout politically and financially. And of course, the thing with people that are in positions like Jared Kushner is that they're compromised because of the material that we're reading about, and perhaps even other material that we're not privy to. They're compromised, so they'll do whatever they are guided and they are told by their sources or their handlers. Everything's a parasitic system. There's parasites. If you look at a flea, one of the reasons why a flea is because it's got a parasite living on it. And so the parasite tells the flea basically, hey, you got to go suck some blood. And that little parasite winds up becoming a worm inside of an animal, a cat or a dog. How do they get worms? The worms are carried by fleas. And it's the parasitic relationship between the worm and the flea that sucks the blood from the cat and the dog and other animals. And this is how it all works. And on top of that worm, who knows who's the parasitic receptor? So unless it's politically expedient for President Kushner to step down, it probably is not going to happen. But it's good at least to see what's behind the scenes. Now, what's really interesting is I found this article today. It's a kind of a difficult article to translate because it comes from a Spanish website. But to the best of my ability, apparently the building that Kushner is at, which is 666 Fifth Avenue, is part of a complex, Rockefeller Plaza. Now remember that name, Rockefeller Plaza. Why Rockefeller Plaza? In what's there? So at the center of Rockefeller Plaza is a statue of Prometheus, who is stealing. It's actually a fountain, and it's a sculpture, and it's in the water fountain. It's at the center of Rockefeller Center. And Prometheus is, of course, the mortal who steals fire from the gods. Right? He tempts fate. He moves beyond his appointed class and position in the grand scheme of things of the universe, and he grabs fire. And what happens to him as a result of this is he has his liver pecked out every single day. That's his punishment. So there are parallels here with Prometheus and Lucifer, and that Lucifer, the fallen angel, steals knowledge from the gods, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is a case to be made here that this, at the center of Rockefeller Plaza, is a paean to Lucifer, and that the entire complex is an esoteric center. Now, this author, again, this is in Spanish, so it's a bit hard to translate, but it's like, what is it? The site is 30 pieces of silver, or 40 pieces of silver. Las monedas de Judas. So it's about betrayal and money, blood money. Anyway, apparently there is a Freemasonic center, a lodge, inside of 666 Fifth Avenue. This is what this author is saying, and that this was the Rockefeller Freemasonic Lodge, and still continues to be. It says, to this lodge belong only educated people of high social and economic status and have been initiated in the last degrees of Freemasonry, 3033 of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. The ritual of the Grand Lodge Rockefeller continues the tradition of the Masonic Enlightenment, and its aim is that its members find the light, understanding light for wisdom, knowledge of truth, and awareness, allowing part of the midspan, and be a spiritual force that allows direct control for the rest of humanity. This is what the author is saying, and that it's actually located inside of 666 Fifth Avenue. Now, I'm just throwing it out there, but it's interesting. And it's also interesting that as David Rockefeller dies, Jared Kushner has a rise to power. And then there's the connection with Baron Trump, who obviously, some people think that he was named after Baron Hilton, whom Trump has a very strong relationship with, of course, with the hotels and everything. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he was also named after Baron von Rothschild, or perhaps the two of them together. In any case, the connections are very, very strange and oddly synchronistic, with Baron having his birthday on the same day that the same day that David Rockefeller dies, and then we have the rise of Jared Kushner, not the rise of Baron Trump, but the rise of Jared Kushner, who seems to be Trump's son from another mother. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there for all you esoteric and occult heads. I wanted to follow up quickly about what's happening with the stabbings here in Austin, Texas. It always amazes me how I'm one or two people away through my Facebook network with people knowing a person who has experienced something tragically in one of these events, whether it's something that happened in Orlando or San Bernardino or London, and now here we go, UT Austin. There was somebody, one of my Facebook peeps knew the guy who was killed on Facebook Live about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. And so it's really interesting how we're not that far away, at least I'm not that far away from one or two people connected to these events. Anyway, so the lowdown is that the young man whose last name was Brown and whose life was ended, he died. This kid actually died. And when you look at the video footage of the stabbings at UT, blood is present. I mean, unlike a lot of these other events where it's, where's the blood? Where's the blood? No, blood was present. You can see the blood. You can see people tending their wounds. And a good friend of the show, Judy, she texted me last night and told me that she knew the Brown family. It was just, through her family, just a few houses down the street. And the whole thing is incredibly bizarre. And apparently, this young man handed his cell phone to somebody and basically said, call my mother and tell her I love her. It was like very intense. Like they knew they were going to die. It's tragic. That's real emotion. And it's not this simulated simulacra of emotion. This is real stuff. And this kid got killed. And Drexel White, who did the stabbing and the killing, there's a 30-day, almost a 45-day gap. There's almost a 45-day gap in Drexel White's. That's an interesting name, Drexel. And I'll tell you the reference here in a second. There's about a 45-day gap in Drexel White's Kendrick's. I'm sorry, it's not Drexel. It's Kendrick's. My bad. Kendrick's White. I was thinking of Drexel in the movie True Romance. Kendrick's White. There's about a 45-day gap where he does not go to school. What happened in that 45-day gap? He had been complaining more and more and more about the state of his mental health. He was going to this student mental health sort of group or association outreach on campus. So there was something going on with Kendrick's White. And we probably won't know what that thing is. But I'm going to go on record and I'm going to say that Kendrick's White was chemically and psychologically manipulated. Now, I'm not going to, give him like a crazy out. But it feels to me like this guy went Manchurian Candidate. This is what it feels like. And unlike the other people who theoretically kill other people and then kill themselves, he was captured alive. So this is going to be very interesting to see what happens and how they handle his trial process. He was captured alive. So we're going to keep an eye on that. And, hearts and prayers go out to the Brown family who lost a kid. They lost a 19-year-old son. And then, of course, there were the other young people who were wounded, not mortally, not fatally, like the young man who passed away. So that's just a bit of an update with what happened at UT. Just wanted to circle back and give you some information. There's a great documentary, which I highly recommend. Saw this last night. It's called Masterpiece, Mastermind. Author, JT Leroy story. I highly recommend this. If you have Amazon, you can watch it. It's part of Amazon Prime. It is a fascinating, absolutely fascinating look at this character named JT Leroy that was created by a woman named Laura Albert. And I was living in the Bay Area back in the 90s when the JT Leroy books were hitting, and they were, such a cause celeb because of the material. And I remember reading about, I never read the books, but I remember reading about them like, oh my God, wow, yeah. This young guy was the son of a mother who was a truck stop prostitute, had to do all these things, and, it's edgy and yada, yada, yada. And, for a brief period of time, because I've dabbled in some writing, I thought, wow, man, why can't I have that kind of experience? Why can't I write from that place? And so real and gritty and blah, 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 blah. And, it wasn't like it was a big piece of real estate in my mind, but it, passed through my consciousness. And so there were two books that were written ostensibly by JT Leroy, but in reality, they're written by this woman named Laura Albert, and she created the character of JT Leroy. And she had her sister-in-law become JT Leroy in public. And they had this very strange family situation. Everybody had different names. Karen Albert was Speedy. Speedy. She was JT Leroy's assistant, and she spoke with an English accent, even though Karen Albert is from New Jersey. And of course, Savannah, who was her sister-in-law, was JT Leroy, kind of a strange, intersexed individual who'd been brought up in very unusual and tragic circumstances, being the son of a truck stop hooker, even though the truck stop hooker never existed. Karen Albert's mother, perhaps not very normal, but certainly not a truck stop hooker. And then her husband, who took on the name of Astor. And in reality, his real name was Greg, and he was a musician in San Francisco. So the three of them created this literary hoax. And the books exploded. And I mean exploded. You had all these celebrities reading the books and loving the books. Like the opening scene is Winona Ryder talking about JT Leroy, and almost as if JT Leroy is Jesus Christ. I mean, it's really weird and pathetic. And what are they celebrating? What are these people celebrating? They're celebrating a type of tragedy of the human condition and the courage to be able to write about it. And of course, there are a number of attendant social issues that plug right in to the social cause that people like to celebrate and venerate. For instance, JT Leroy is, sexually ambiguous. He's a man, he's a woman, and of course that sexual ambiguity was, part of the gig, part of the production, because Savannah was a woman. who is pretending to be a young man who may or may not agree to being a man or a woman. So we have this whole dysmorphia taking place literally about a good decade, or maybe 2 decades before it moves into mass public awareness. And this is what JT Leroy becomes. And everything is, and these celebrities, it's just, they fawn it's incredible. And they're all taken for a ride because it just ticks all those boxes, all those sort of leftist, liberal, progressive, to even a large extent demonic boxes. And when you see the people that are in support of JT Leroy in the book and the whole 9 yards, you go, oh yeah, there they are, the cast of characters. And there's Courtney Love and Winona Ryder and Gus Van Sant, and the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. One guy who pops up in this that's really interesting is Billy Corgan, and Billy Corgan has kind of come over to the truth side of things in the last 5 or 6 years. And in the movie, he befriends Speedy, and Speedy, aka Laura Albert, confides in him that the whole thing is, not as real as she's crafted it out to be, and he's really okay with it. And Billy Corgan actually comes out looking pretty good. Like, he supports her throughout the whole thing, and he keeps her secret. And but the writing doesn't take place. The writing doesn't get the acclaim unless JT Leroy is attached to it. You understand that? Unless they have this tragic figure of JT Leroy, that the writing doesn't work. That the writing is just, if Laura Albert wrote those books, I doubt if they get picked up. I doubt if they have such widespread acclaim. And you've got to see this. The way that it all happens and unfolds is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. And so what do we see? We see the doctrine of the left, and we see this doctrine of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just this kind of social acceptance via the progressive model, where they want to celebrate and venerate victimhood in many ways. This is what it is. It is the cult of suffering. It is the cult of victimhood. It is the crucifixion of the everyday person. And yet there is never this sense of transcendence and redemption with these works, except for perhaps acclaim and money and the permission for other people to feel as vulnerable and weak and as open with their sordid tale of dysfunction and damaged goods. And clearly, when you zoom out, Laura Albert is damaged. I mean, she was sexually molested when she was 3 years old by a family friend. And this is what happens. Now, what's fascinating from an astrological perspective is that Laura Albert is a Scorpio, and she's got a Venus-Mars conjunction in Sagittarius, which is publishing. And she has her true node in Gemini. So by splitting her personality, she's like living her true node. How about that? And also writing, which is a very Gemini true node perspective. I'm going to do a chart and blog post on Laura Albert. It's really, I think it'd be worth really just digging into this thing, because there's so much from a sociological perspective that is so fascinating about this story and multiple identities and the cause of social justice and the celebration of the cult of the victim and all these major things. And none of it's real. None of it is real. I mean, there were 2 movies that were made out of her books, one by Asia Argento, who is really pissed that she got played. I mean, it's fascinating stuff, and I highly, 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 highly recommend this documentary, because it gives you a lot of insight into, what flies as art, why it's celebrated, who celebrates it, and how they're, in their own way, taken for a ride. Very fascinating stuff. Really, really fascinating. Well, boys and girls, I think that's about it for today. We've covered quite a few bases here. We talked about Jared Kushner. We talked about the follow-up to the UT event from 2 days ago, and the JT Leroy Masterpiece Mastermind documentary, which I highly recommend over on Amazon. video. And meanwhile, we're slowly lurching towards whatever is going to happen over in North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and China. I think tomorrow we're going to do a show about H.R. McMaster. I've been sort of digging around him psychically a little bit, and I found some interesting things, especially as it relates to the Sabian symbols. So we're going to maybe do something on H.R. McMaster and who this character is, and how he's going to impact the rest of us with his presence in the Oval Office. All right, so this is your 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix, and it's always great to be here and share a morning with you. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open what's possible. We'll be back 24 hours from now. Until then, keep it real, keep it sacred. I'll see you tomorrow.